Welcome to another episode of The Marketer's Edge, a series designed to share senior level marketing perspective about marketer challenges, opportunities, and agency relationships. Our goal is to help marketers and agencies learn from other marketers across different industries. Today, we're talking with Autumn Pruitt, a small business owner at Hardy's Coffee Company. Autumn, thanks so much for joining us today. How have you been?
Doing fine. Thanks for having me today.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, listen, I've got a small handful of questions for you. But before we do that, can you tell me a little bit about Hardy Coffee? And obviously, you're a business owner. So, what you do for the company, you probably do a lot of things. I'd like our audience to know what kind of company it is, what you do for them. So, if you could tell us a little bit about that, that would be great.
The business actually started as a bakery initially. That was 14 years ago this month, which feels a little surreal. But
Wow.
initially, I was my only employee on a small corner bakery in the Old Market district of Omaha. And about a year and a half later, we had the opportunity to take over the coffee shop that we were initially subleasing from. Opened a second location just a couple years later, started roasting in 2015. And at this point, we have four locations in addition to our bakery and roasting facility. And so my
Wow.
day to day is a little bit of a mixed bag, but I am the CEO. I am also in charge of sales and marketing for the company. And so that's still a job as I've continued to delegate other things. That one I've really enjoyed keeping on my plate.
That's great. That's great. So tell me, why did you get into the business at all, and what do you like most about it?
Yeah, I think that there's just no more authentic way to bring people together than around great coffee and great food. And so I love my community, and it's the opportunity to kind of create those special connections throughout the course of the day at a lot of different locations. Um, and so that's so much of why I do what I do. Baking is definitely in my blood. My grandpa was a cook during World War II and then worked at a small bakery in Western Nebraska after he got out of the service. And so he kind of taught my mom the tricks of the trade. She passed them down to me, and we've learned coffee from very smart people as we've gone. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, it is. As a small business owner, you have to wear a lot of different hats, and it is nice sort of peeling some stuff off, and it's nice being somewhat in control of what you can kind of hang on to, the things that you really like doing. So I'm
yes.
curious, with four locations, and that's great. Congratulations on having four different locations. How do you effectively market the brand and keep foot traffic steady, or as much as you can steady each and every week?
We really love to use things that are word of mouth or that act like word of mouth. And so social media has been a really great tool for us for our brick and mortar locations. I think it's so funny to think back to 2010 when we started, when that felt very cutting edge. And now, like, to continue learning and figuring out the algorithm and what that looks like on any given day, it feels like just as soon as you think you have it figured out, something changes. And so, in addition to that, we use a lot of email marketing as well. And so, we have a really robust email list that we stay in touch with at least twice a week, and that's been a good rhythm for us to keep promotions front of mind for people, to make sure that people still feel like they're hearing from me directly, which is kind of a fun platform to have. Mhm.
Yeah. What kind of, you mentioned promotions, what kind of other content are you either posting or emailing to people that, shop your stores?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. And it's one of those, some businesses, it seems like they have to work really hard to think about content to share. And for us, it's like we have beautiful product that we're making fresh every day. And so it's more of a process to say, how do we not share too much? How do we make sure that
Okay.
we are featuring the right things and giving enough time to promote upcoming events? And so just really trying to curate a marketing calendar and stick to it. This week we did a fun little collaboration for Valentine's Day, being able to share some cake orders that are available, being able to talk about seasonal drinks that are coming up. We have a small business marketing event that we're doing in 2 weeks. So it's kind of making sure that those things are sprinkled in, adding value, also making sure that we continue to ask people for their business along the way too.
That's great. Are there? I would imagine there are some of the national chains in the Omaha area.
Oh yeah, yeah, we've got every style of competition. So I think national chains are interesting because it's the opportunity to learn from them. Like, what are they doing that's
Sure.
working? Also, to set ourselves apart and say these are some ways that we're similar, but this is what makes us your neighborhood coffee shop.
Yeah. So how do you try and differentiate yourself from a national chain in market?
Yeah, I think a few different ways. There's the fact that we do make everything in house from scratch. And so just by talking about the products themselves, to talk about our seasonal drinks and to be able to have the transparency of telling people what's in it and what's not in it is a nice benefit for that. And then I think that there's just some ways that each of our shops are a little bit different. And so to play to the customers that are regulars there, a really fun thing that we've done the last two small business Saturdays. So if that's the Saturday between Thanksgiving and I
Right.
don't know, Cyber Monday, it's like this interesting little weekend of activity. And so the last couple of years, we've partnered with local photographers to be at each of our shops. And so people can come get family photos taken while they're also shopping and say, if you have family in town for the holidays, stop by, try our new seasonal drink menu. But here's something of value that you can add to your holiday card for the year, update. There were a lot of people that were looking for work this time of year to be able to have updated headshots to say, like, this is weird. It has nothing to do with coffee, but it is a way that we can support local
Yeah.
photographers and create physical space for our customers to be welcomed in. And so
That's great. Great. Have you, you mentioned you started roasting at a certain point in time after you had started the business. Have you always been involved in the B2B, the business to business selling of coffee as well as direct to consumers?
we haven't always. And so when we first started roasting in 2015, that was specifically for our locations to say, okay, at this point
Okay.
we had two different shops and we wanted to start by focusing there. But we knew that there was always the potential for this additional revenue stream and to also just find a way to support other businesses with a great product. And so
Right.
starting later in that year and ever since we've just been growing our wholesale coffee business and that's been a whole different animal which has been a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I'm curious. Does marketing directly to a business require a different set of skills or a different kind of approach that consumer business, marketing doesn't require? And if so, what are they? How would you describe them?
Unfortunately, yes. I wish it could be something where one approach would fit all of those requirements
Right.
uh, but yeah, I think Instagram is not B2B for us. It's a situation where we really focus on consumers coming into our shops there, and it is interesting. I think sometimes one of our very best salespeople is our physical locations. Like if somebody is looking for a new coffee provider and they happen to come into one of our shops, it's very helpful if they have a great experience there. Like that's non-negotiable. But then we also have actual salespeople that are cold calling, that are emailing, that are going to networking events, that are sending samples, that are doing more of those very specific and targeted approaches for these businesses to say, hey, we don't imagine that you're just scrolling on Instagram today and might happen upon us. How do we come to you and let you know all of the things that we offer?
Got it. And what side of your business do you think is toughest to manage and grow, and why? Why is that?
You know, it would be the shops. I think we have over 50 wholesale accounts now. We roast
Yeah.
over 1,200 pounds of coffee each week that we're using in-house, but also sending to all of them. But we are able to do that with about 5 employees in that department. It's a shelf-stable
Okay.
product, something that we've gained some really good efficiencies as we've gone, compared to our 4 locations where we have 70 employees, a lot of part-time people, a lot of moving parts, a lot more cost of
Sure.
goods. And so but I don't think in the way that we've grown, we wouldn't have had as successful of a wholesale program if we hadn't started with a
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
people could just in the
Right.
wild.
Yeah. I was going to
So,
ask. I was going to ask you the the stores probably are a great marketing tool for the commercial side, building awareness for the brand and all that kind of good stuff.
They are, and they really become a showroom for us to say, hey, like once people are interested, come visit our roasting facility, come taste our coffee here. If you want some experience behind the bar before yours is built out, like we'll work with you
Mm-hmm.
here. It's really a way to show people what we've done with what we have.
Right.
So,
So on the B2B side, you're working directly with companies, but those companies have potential hardy coffee consumers working
mhm.
in them. Do you ever sort of blur the lines and try and do a little marketing for the consumer side of the business when you're playing in the B2B space, or do you keep them pretty clearly defined and delineated?
Oh, I don't know. I think that hopefully any of those pathways lead to good coffee being consumed, whether it's in our four walls or whether it's helping other people serve excellent coffee with confidence, and so
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. What would you say is the toughest part about being a small business owner?
yeah, you don't get to just put in your 2 weeks notice when things are hard. It's not, there's no safety net. It's a situation where like you figure it out. And I know that people do close and make that decision, but at the point of business that we're in, that would be really difficult. And so when
Yeah.
you run into these
Yeah.
things, and it's the opportunity to lean in, and you don't really have the luxury of leaning back. And so
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. And on the flip side, what would you say is the best part about being a small business owner?
I think it's the people, and it's our customers for sure, but it's also a
Yeah.
lot of those people I already talked about that we get to work shoulder to shoulder with 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week to be able to do the work together. And um, it's this magical thing. They're like, this did not exist before. And out of this idea we had and the work we've put in, there's something new in the market and in the world that didn't exist before. And that's pretty
Yeah.
rewarding.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. So if you were talking to a person that was thinking about getting into their own business, regardless of the type of business it was, what counsel would you give them after, having done this for as many years as you have?
Yeah, I think some of the best advice is always just to work in whatever industry it's going to be before you are jumping in as an owner. I think that
Okay.
a number of people that come up to me and say, it must be so much fun to own a coffee shop. It must be so much fun to own a bakery. And of course it is, or else we wouldn't still be doing it. But
Sure.
you need to know if it's the kind of fun that you will enjoy, because there's a lot of
Mhm.
hard things to do. And so I think
Sure.
if you're going to switch from being an auto mechanic to a lawyer, you're going to want some reps in that industry before your name is on every line. So it's a lot easier to try it as an employee and to get a lot of experience that way before you are all in as an owner.
Yeah. They people talk about working in the business versus on the business, and that as a small business owner is sometimes difficult to do. To pull yourself back. How do you kind of manage that in giving yourself the time to take a step back and think about the business a little bit more broadly versus managing the day to day tasks to keep things moving.
Yeah, we have a really good team of people, and so I think that having managers that you trust to make decisions like you would if you were there, and being able to have a really consistent schedule when it comes to meetings internally with your team. But I'm a firm believer in marking out my calendar, making sure that there's the most important things get prioritized, and so that includes strategy, and that includes budgeting, and that
Right.
includes things that nobody else can do. And so we try really hard to delegate the things that other people can do and train well, and then take ownership of the things that also need to be done for it to continue to grow.
That's great. And so, as a small business owner, where do you turn to get sort of counsel like that, and just it's easy as a small business owner to kind of get in your little bubble and not really see a lot of the outside world.
Mhm.
What resources do you tap into, just from a business management standpoint? Just thinking about other small business owners that might be watching this. What counsel would you give them? What do you do?
Yeah, and I think that that describes me pretty well for the first several years of business. I was very heads down, very in the four walls, just doing the job at hand because there was always something to
Right.
do, but it felt really isolating. And so I think that in those early years, just having a handful of other entrepreneurs that I could reach out to, like it wasn't a lot of people, it was just the right people to say, golly, I'm dealing with this thing. Do you have any experience with that? And I think most of the time it wasn't that they had answers so much as just knowing that you weren't in it alone. That was really helpful.
Right. I'm
And so I
sure.
think continuing to have that circle of trusted friends in this type of business was super helpful. But also so many podcasts, so many books. I continue to just be a student and
Yeah.
have hired a business coach that we worked with for the last 3 years, somebody that has experience in
Nice.
other areas that will hold us accountable to having those strategy meetings. It's a lot harder to reschedule when there's another person waiting on you instead of just a calendar date with yourself.
Right, right. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, calendar date with yourself. Exactly. Um, those are exciting, aren't they?
Yeah.
uh, what? So that's sort of like business. The business side of your business. What about the marketing side? Like how do you, as a small business owner, learn about different approaches, technologies, ways in which to market to your consumers or the businesses that you're partnering with?
Yeah, I think a lot of those same things. People that we work closely with, it's podcasts and it's books and it's seminars and it's continuing to stay relevant. And I also hire a lot of people younger than me, and so it's also listening to their ideas. Like, okay, I'm not on TikTok. Try and convince me why it should be, and what catches your eye in that process. And so I think it's not to get so yeah, so deeply rooted in your ways that you miss out on new
Sure,
opportunities.
sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. Have you ever used outside agencies to support the marketing of the work that you do? And if so, what kind of agencies have you turned to?
Yeah, a couple different times. So I mentioned a bit of the history of our business, how we started as a bakery and bought a coffee shop and started roasting. Well, we had a lot of brand confusion through that time. And so
Right.
in 2015 is when we launched Hardy Coffee Company, where we did our roasting. But it was in 2018 that we did a rebrand to say, okay, we have Hardy Coffee Company, but at that time we also had Bliss Old Market Bakery and Aromas Coffeehouse. We had three competing brands that were all under the same umbrella. And it made
Yeah.
sense internally. Like all of us understood who did what and how the systems worked. But the moment you started talking to a customer, their eyes would glaze over and they'd say, okay, but who makes your cinnamon rolls again? And so we worked with a company called Fruitful Design at the time, who is a design and strategy agency here in Omaha, to be able to really identify who we were and what we wanted to be known for moving forward. And I think that that work was really helpful to be able to
Was
really create clarity around our brand.
it?
Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in the last year, we've also dabbled a bit in direct mailers and some of those like very old school methods of marketing that seem to be having a bit of
Sure.
a rebirth. And
Right.
so that was something that I did not have experience with. And to say, of course, we're going to have to pay for it to be printed and mailed anyway. Like, can you also help guide us through what would make the most sense and where to send that as we were still trying to introduce ourselves to a neighborhood that we were relatively new
Yeah.
to. And so,
Have you found that to
mhm.
be effective for him?
Not yet. I think it's a hard thing to measure. And those are all hard things where you say, how many times do I have to send this before somebody recognizes
Right.
our name? Well, like how often
Yeah.
do you need to see this brand before it becomes part of your consciousness? And so we did see a lot of those coupons come in. I love that it's something that's measurable to say we sent this many and we had this many redeemed, and this is our percentage of new customers, and these are ones that are recurring. Um, I
Yeah,
appreciate I appreciate metrics, but yeah, I think that the verdict is still out on if that's the right path for
that's
us moving
cool.
forward.
Got it. Just getting back to the brand repositioning, I'm curious, was there a lot of brand equity that existed in each of those three brands, and kind of, what was the toughest challenge that you faced, and sort of putting them all under a single umbrella?
There was, and we had we had started the bakery, but we had purchased the coffee house, Aromas Coffeehouse. So it
Okay.
had been around for about 10 years before we took ownership. And so there was the risk of saying, will people know that's still us? And so we had to do a lot of that education. But I think what we
Got it.
determined was like, this is only going to become more confusing the bigger we get. And uh, people that already know and love us probably aren't going to leave if we change our name. But there's a pretty good possibility that people who have never heard of us before may never find us if they're just confused by our marketing. And so,
Right.
what's the old adage? Like, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the next best time is today. Like, we decided just to, like, we knew it was only going to get more complicated the larger we got. And so we made that
Right.
decision to rebrand before we opened our Highlander location, which
Okay.
was a strategic decision.
Yeah. Any blowback from the move, or was it generally received pretty positively? Would you say?
I would say generally positively.
Right.
Everybody has opinions. And so I think you have to just be
Sure.
up for hearing them and also explaining the story. Like, this is why we picked this name over this one, and this is the direction
Right.
we're moving, for people to
Yep.
know, like, Hardy's a real word, and I think it describes the people of the Midwest, but it's also my maiden name. And so to be able to tell that story and to get people
Right.
involved in that,
Yep.
I think people are more willing to come along for the journey.
And what about sort of the internal employee base? Was there any challenges in sort of getting everybody on board? And in a company like yours, you're part of your
Mhm.
marketing, or the people that are sitting inside the four walls of each of those four retail establishments.
I think that it's also about telling the story well there. And so your job as a leader
Right.
is to make sure that, yeah, that you're convincing people why you made that choice and how to come along for that. I think including people in the decision making process was really helpful. And there's still a little muscle memory when you answer the phone to not not say the old name. It takes a little bit of time, but I don't think
Yeah.
anybody was actively taking us down from the inside. So
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Well, I've got just a couple more questions for you. Any advice you'd give to a marketer or maybe another small business owner thinking about bringing a new agency on board? Any counsel you'd provide them just based on your experience?
you know, um, I should probably ask you that question because I've worked with so few agencies. It's one of those things where I feel anxious about it. I think that you kind of get
Okay,
into the mindset of like, I can do this myself and I can do it cheaper. And so most of the time, as a
right.
small business, that's what you choose to do. Um, but I do think the things that tend to turn me off from agencies that reach out are people that um, can't succinctly say what they could offer. Like, this is what we're best at, or this is how we would make life better, or here are some metrics of what would prove success. I think that tend to be somehow added on a lot of spam email lists, and that's not the way to run my business. And so I think a personalized
Yeah.
approach goes a long way.
Yep, that's cool. Yeah, I was going to ask you that very question. How did you go about picking that one firm that did the rebranding? Did they come through a referral, or did you sort of look at a number of different agencies?
We kind of grew up together in Omaha. Our businesses did. They were right next to each other, and so they had known just kind of the history of the business along the way. And they literally were above us in the historic building we have in the Benson district. And
Oh,
so
nice.
I think
That's
because we
easy.
had so many conversations over coffee to say like, oh, like the free advice of, have you thought about this? Or do you mind if I redesign that menu for you? Or, like the things that they had done along the way. Once we had the money to spend with an actual agency, we chose them and
Yeah.
they did a
Yeah.
great job.
Great.
Mhm.
So I've got my last and probably the most important question of the interview here is, what
Mhm.
is your favorite coffee drink?
Oh, coffee, I think that just a delicious pour over of whatever single origin we have, it makes things interesting for me every morning still. And I think
Yeah.
coffee is one of those things where the more you learn about it, the more you realize there is to learn. And so it's been a fun journey to keep going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, delicious, naturally processed single origin from Costa Rica this morning that just had all the right notes. So
Yeah, that's great. How do you is there an element? I know I said it was the last question, but I'm just curious. Is there an element of like research and development involved in your business, or do you learn about like new flavors, varieties, things like that from the suppliers? Um, just curious how that all works.
a little bit of everything, and we have great relationships with our importers and the actual producers, and so there's the opportunity to try new samples often. Um, Omaha continues to grow as a coffee city, but Kansas City is not far away, and there's a really good hub there of other coffee mines. So that tends to be a drive we make pretty often to get out of our
That's
little
great.
bubble and keep learning.
Check out some other markets. That's great. Well, listen, I really appreciate you making the time today. It's been a great conversation. You're my first small business owner interview, and being a small business owner myself, it's great to dialogue with you. And a lot of the challenges that you deal with in your coffee world are not dissimilar from challenges I deal with in my sales and marketing world. And I'm sure not too dissimilar from the challenges that other small business owners, listening today or watching today, also have to deal with. So, getting out of our bubbles and listening to others talk about things like we talked about today, I'm sure will prove helpful to other folks. So wish you all the best, and really appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, you too, Mark. I appreciate it. I hope you have a great
All
rest
right.
of your Friday. All right.
Yeah. Thanks. You too. All right.
Bye.